crews in Southern California were assessing the damage Saturday after the region was rattled by another powerful earthquake late Friday evening. The magnitude 7.1 quake caused injuries, sparked fires and closed roadways. The latest earthquake happened just after 8 p.m. local time and was centered in the Mojave Desert near the town of Ridgecrest, which is still recovering from a 6.4 quake on the 4th of July. Social media posts showed restaurant lights swaying, store interiors rocking and trucks shaking violently more than 100 miles from the center of the quake. Friday night's quake is Southern California's most powerful one since a 7.1 quake struck near a U.S. Marine Corps base in the Mojave Desert in 1999. The last earthquake to cause major destruction in the region was in 1994 when a 6.7 magnitude quake in densely populated Northridge killed 57 people and caused billions of dollars in damage.
California Governor Gavin Newsom declared a state of emergency and warned residents to be wary of new tremors on Saturday, after the southern part of the state was hit by a second significant earthquake in as many days. "We should expect more quakes," a top seismologist on California's tremor. Grateful for everyone working tirelessly on the recovery effort through the night and this morning, Newsom wrote on Twitter. "As Californians, we always have to be prepared for the next earthquake." Residents of Ridgecrest, a city of about 27,000 people 150 miles northeast of Los Angeles, woke to new damage after the magnitude 7.1 tremor hit as darkness fell on Friday, jolting the area after a 6.4 quake struck 34 hours earlier. Kern County's fire chief, David Witt, said there were no known fatalities but damage had not been fully assessed. "We do feel like there is damage, but we don't know the extent of it yet," Witt said at a news conference, according to CNN. "Nobody was trapped, no major collapses that we know of, but we are out there searching." Witt said officials were inspecting buildings and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was inspecting a nearby dam. Just northwest of Ridgecrest, U.S. Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake was evacuated of all non-essential personnel. The facility, which at more than 1.1 acres is larger than the state of Rhode Island, reported no injuries, Reuters said. Experts warn that Southern California could expect more significant shakes in the near future.
Hey, I want to show
There
you
is about a 1 in 10 chance that another 7.0 quake could hit within the next week, and the chance of a 5.0 magnitude quake is approaching certainty. Lucy Jones, a seismologist at the California Institute of Technology and a former science advisor at the U.S. Geological Survey, told reporters. She added that the new quake probably ruptured along about 25 miles of fault line and was part of a continuing sequence.
A massive 7.1 magnitude earthquake hit Southern California last night, causing damage and injuries throughout the area. It's the second earthquake to rattle the area in 2 days. It struck in the Mojave Desert. It's near the town of Ridgecrest, California. Our Carter Evans is in Ridgecrest with more.
These earthquakes have just rocked this community, and they've done a lot of damage. This is just one small example inside the East Ridge Market. We're here at Ridgecrest after the first quake, and then at 8:19 last night, the shaking started again and grew increasingly violent.
Everybody okay?
This is the first glimpse of the damage inside a Ridgecrest supermarket. Tiles fell from the ceiling, food and other items flew off the shelves.
The air is really thick, dusty. This is a bad one.
Gas lines ruptured, sparking numerous fires. California officials say they're bracing for the worst.
There have been a number of injuries reported. There's been a significant increased number of EMS calls to the 911 centers. Huge priorities right now for medical support and for firefighting and for emergency power.
Even in Los Angeles, more than 150 miles away,
it continues
this is a very strong
to rattle
earthquake.
pretty strong here.
8:21 here on the air. We're experiencing very strong shaking.
Wow.
I think we need to get under the desk.
All right, we're going to go to break. We'll be right back after this. Wow.
The magnitude 7.1 quake came just 1 day after Thursday's 6.4 jolt, which at the time was the largest earthquake to hit California in 2 decades. That quake turning life into chaos without warning turned out to be a foreshock. But this is what's left behind. The region was just starting to clean up, like the volunteers at the Ridgecrest Library, picking up thousands of books that fell from the stacks.
We're just so thankful it was closed. Because can you imagine those books falling on some poor kid or some elderly person?
The library was also closed when last night's quake hit. Elsewhere in Ridgecrest, security video captured the shaking at a laundromat and inside this convenience store. The tape stops as the power cuts out. We talked to the store owner, Tony Abdulatif.
How much do you think you lost here?
Be honest with you, from yesterday and today, I would say about 100,000.
No insurance.
No insurance for the earthquake, of course.
You got to have earthquake insurance, and even then, it usually doesn't cover the contents of your home. The damages to this store are going to cost a lot of money, and the cost to this community is going to be much higher. The good news is there are no reports of injuries or deaths, but the aftershocks continue, and seismologists say the probability of another strong one occurring over the next few days is very high.
Dr. Wendy Bohan joins us now from Washington. She's a science communication specialist and geologist for the Incorporated Research Institutes for Seismology. So, Dr. Bohan, we're hearing that the fault where the earthquake happens is actually now growing. What does that mean exactly? We heard Carter Evans in that piece talk about future earthquakes coming in the next few days.
Right. So the 2 earthquakes that have happened, the 2 big ones, the magnitude 6.4 on the 4th of July, and then the big one, the magnitude 7.1 that happened today, are both related. They occurred on the same fault. In fact, the first earthquake ruptured 2 faults, or broke 2 faults that were at right angles to each other. And so these earthquakes are all related, and that tells us a little bit about what we can expect in the future.
And how long do you think that these aftershock tremors could go on for?
That's a great question, and something that people, in particular around the epicenter, want to know. And so we can expect there to be felt earthquakes for a long time in the future. The USGS gives an aftershock forecast that tells us what we can expect. There's not a high probability of having a larger earthquake, but we do have a high probability of experiencing earthquakes like a magnitude 5 and maybe even a magnitude 6. So people need to be prepared to experience more shaking, and especially if you're in some of the small towns near the epicenter like Trona or Ridgecrest. This is really going to rattle your nerves. You guys have been having a hard time. Expect there to be more shaking. Make sure that you drop, cover, and hold on as soon as you feel the earthquake shaking. And you know what? Earthquakes are scary. It's okay to be scared. You just also have to be prepared.
Yeah, you know, I want to also ask you, I mean, it's so terrifying looking at the video and to hear you talk about a 5 or a 6 potentially could come in the coming days. We just don't know. But the earthquake and most of these aftershocks, they happen in a fairly centralized area in California. Can you sort of explain why that is, that it's happening where it is right now? Is there a sense?
Right. So all of California is actually part of the plate boundary between the North American and the Pacific plate. So all of that is helping to take up the strain of these two big, massive plates that are moving. The area where it occurred is in an area called the Eastern California Shear Zone. So we don't have a lot of really big earthquakes out there, but we do have a lot of earthquakes in that area. So all of these earthquakes are related. The foreshock, the main shock, and then all of these aftershocks are happening in this location on a broad scale because of the motion between those two plates. And if you sort of zoom in a little bit, they're happening because each one of those earthquakes makes another earthquake more likely. Usually they're smaller, occasionally, very rarely, they're bigger, and that's what we saw with this most recent event.
So when you talk about the 6.4 earthquake that took place on the 4th of July,
Good morning. Thanks for being here. Mark Ghilarducci, Director of Governor Newsom's Office of Emergency Services. Here at the State Operations Center, we're in the second operational period following the 7.1 magnitude earthquake that struck up in the Ridgecrest area. Let me start off by really conveying our continued thoughts and with all the folks that have been impacted by this and the communities. They have had a week-long series of earthquakes and earthquake swarm, and then of course they had the large 6.4 and now the 7.1, and they have been through a lot, both in Ridgecrest in Kern County and in Trona in San Bernardino County, and so that whole area there, we are continuing to keep them in our thoughts and prayers and working very, very diligently to support all of their efforts. Today, as the sun came up, we started to get better situational awareness from local authorities and state assets that are on the ground in both communities. We're happy to report that there is damage. As we reported last night, there were a number of structure fires. There were gas leaks. The power was out for a majority of the communities. There was road damage. Rock slides, etc. Things you would see in an earthquake of this magnitude. But the damage that we are seeing this morning in the light is not as extensive as one could have expected. Now, keep that in mind that we are going to be continuing to do extensive damage assessments. Will require a detailed review. And for those individuals and homes and the local governments that are continuing to respond, all assets continue to be provided, both fire and rescue, urban search and rescue, law enforcement, mutual aid assets continue to be made available and are engaged throughout the region. Last night, there was shelters that were open, and the population of the shelter reached just about 200, a little under 200. As a series of aftershocks are occurring, makes sense and logical that people will be a little bit concerned about being in their homes. And so we saw larger shelter populations last night. The Red Cross continues to support those shelters. But in addition, logistically, we have moved into place a significant amount of support in the way of cots, water, meals, and other commodities to make available as necessary. Also happy to report that the major grocery stores and commodity distribution points are back operational. That's a very significant positive step to ensure that those local supermarkets and other local community stores can be made available for individuals to be able to get supplies and food and other commodities as they begin to do their cleanup of damages. Still quite a bit of non-structural damage in each of the homes. People reporting things like glass breaking and shelves that have been overturned, etc. But there have been also structural damage to homes, and as I mentioned earlier, some structural fires predominantly driven by broken gas mains. Today, the power is virtually back on across the city of Ridgecrest. There's a small portion that still is out, and roughly 46 or so customers. And in Trona, the power is still generally out, working on that to try to get the power back up today. In addition, water is they're finding not as big of an issue, although we've got water commodities available should it be necessary. Right now, both communities are reporting that they have enough water. So those critical lifelines are important and continue to be monitored by us. The state will, of course, as you know, yesterday, Governor Newsom did request from the White House a presidential emergency declaration The emergency declaration is a declaration for immediate direct federal assistance. That allows us to turn to our federal partners and get life-saving assets. With us today is Bob Fenton, the regional administrator from FEMA. FEMA is already engaged here with us at the State Operations Center as a result of the quick request by Governor Newsom. FEMA has been providing already support for us on the ground. We're also deploying today damage assessment teams and structural engineers in support of Kern County and San Bernardino County, and that's really to go in and start looking at a little bit more granular review of the damage that has occurred. That helps us to build what are we looking at like in total losses, destroyed, damaged, major, minor, to be able to put that information together to make the request for a major disaster declaration. At this point, the State Operations Center is in Level 1 full operation, will remain this way until further notice. The governor has approved all assets of the state to be made available. He updated the state of emergency last night to include San Bernardino and to reflect the new damages associated with the 7.1 that occurred last night. Today our effort is really going to be to continue to work with both San Bernardino and Kern County, and of course the cities, the town of Trona and the city of Ridgecrest, have had, again, further discussions with the elected leaders and the operational folks, police chiefs and fire chiefs in both communities this morning. That communication link is working very well. Communications overall from cell capability and other communications modalities are working well, and that's also positive. And you'll hear a little bit in a minute that while we've had a significant amount of impact to our roads last night, throughout the night, Caltrans did an unbelievable job in working to get roads patched and fixed and rock slides cleared. While we're, of course, responding to this, we are monitoring the weather conditions. It is going to be in the high 90s, low hundreds over the next day or so. There will be some warm, gusty winds from 25 to 35 miles per hour. This is significant because of individuals possibly not wanting to go back in their home. We're going to want to make sure that there'll be enough cooling centers and other kinds of things like water and shade to make sure that we don't have secondary issues. We're also monitoring fire weather activity throughout that part of the state and other parts of the state with regards to potential for wildfire, and Chief Porter from CAL FIRE will mention that in a few minutes. So with that, I'm going to now turn it over to the Commissioner of the California Highway Patrol, Commissioner Warren Stanley, who will talk about CHP's support.
Thank you, Director Gilladutri. As far as the CHP, we have approximately 68 personnel assigned to this incident. Started out, most of them were escorting some of the big rigs that are carrying supplies up to the Ridgecrest, Trona area. We also have a number of personnel that are also providing law enforcement services to our law enforcement partners there, the police department, the sheriff's department, and the fire department. We also have 3 of our airships up there, 2 helicopters and an airplane. The helicopters are using their thermal imaging capabilities to look for additional gas leaks and fires, and they're also assisting with damage assessment. Our airplane is also helping to check out some of the roadways in the area to make sure they're clear and no additional damage. And Director Kim will talk about that in a few moments. Also, our officers on the ground that are providing that roving patrol, they're also checking on all the state facilities in those areas to try to do a preliminary damage assessment to make a determination that those offices can open on Monday when state business goes back into action. So that's what we're doing now. We have a great team working together, working here with the other state agencies and our law enforcement partners in the area of Ridgecrest and up in Trona. And with that, I'll turn it over to Major Baldwin.
Good morning, everybody. The California Military Department has 300 personnel on duty in response to this incident. We're flying missions in support of other response agencies to move responders and supplies into the area. We are also going to be flying both manned and unmanned surveillance aircraft to assist with damage assessment. We've moved 200 personnel in the vicinity of the incident to be ready to respond to requests for support from law enforcement or any other agency. And the rest of the California National Guard and California State Guard are ready in the event that additional military capability is required. We've coordinated with officials at the Pentagon, and if we need additional out-of-state support, they've committed that they'll be able to help us quickly if that's necessary. I'll be followed by Chief Tom Porter from CAL FIRE.
Good morning. CAL FIRE, California's fire department, is fully staffed at peak levels to support this event, as well as be prepared for any wildfires that may occur throughout the state during this period. Also, our Office of the State Fire Marshal is engaged with pipeline inspections under their jurisdiction and certifying that those are being done, and the petroleum pipelines that they're looking at are safe to operate, and assessing, along with DGS, our responsibilities under the state building assessment. Thank you. I'll be followed by David Kim, Secretary, California Transportation Agency.
Good morning. There is good news to report on the status of roadways impacted by last night's event. All repairs have been made. All roads are now open. As the director indicated at the outset, in particular, State Route 178 sustained significant damage last night. Caltrans crews worked overnight to repair that damage. They also cleared all rock slides on State Route 178, State Route 127, and State Route 190. Also, all state bridges have been fully inspected and cleared for safety. And finally, Caltrans staff is in touch with local officials to provide any assistance for any needed inspections. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Marco Meach, Deputy Secretary, Health and Human Services.
Thank you. Good morning. We have fully activated across our agency, and that includes the Emergency Medical Services Authority, the California Department of Public Health, and the California Department of Social Services. Secretary Galley is in communication with the local hospital, and we are not tracking any unmet needs at the time. We're also looking and are in contact with all the medical, health, and community care facilities in the region and are not tracking any unmet need. As Director Ghilarducci noted, we do have a shelter that is active in that area, and we're not tracking any unmet need at that shelter either. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Bob Fenton. I'm the FEMA Region 9 Regional Administrator. We've been coordinating closely with the State of California Office of Emergency Services since July 4th and the first earthquake. Following the event last night, we went ahead and deployed all the key federal agencies and departments up here to work with OES and state agencies to make sure that if there's any resource that the state needs to aid those impacted, that it's available and ready. We've gone ahead and pre-positioned some resources and will continue to coordinate with the state. As Mark had talked about, the next step is actually doing preliminary damage assessments to see if what other federal authorities may be brought to bear to help those in the recovery of this event. That concludes my briefing. Thank you.
So we just came out of an hour-long briefing with the governor, and to reiterate the priorities that he set for us, and what we'll continue to work here at the State Operations Center over the next operational period is to obviously continue to support the efforts to protect lives and property and the environment throughout this throughout the response phase as we transition from response into recovery. Continue to coordinate all the emergency operations that we're doing here and in our regional centers and at the local EOCs. Work to make sure that all of the critical infrastructure lifeline restoration gets done in this next operational period, working with our private sector utility partners, telecoms, and supply chain management groups. We'll continue to provide accurate public information as to what's happening with regards to the response and recovery. And then we'll focus on meeting whatever unmet needs are throughout the region for health and medical and people with access to functional needs. Let me just say also that as we transition to recovery today, it's sort of two things happening. We're still responding, but we're moving into place these assets that really can focus on determining the total amount of damage, and so that we can really start to work progressively to get individuals in the community back up on in the normal way of life. So that is going to be a big focus and we will probably, as the operational period goes on into tonight, tomorrow, you'll see some transitioning of response resources being demobilized and different resources being activated to be able to cover the various kinds of needs that will take place. And so the State Operations Center here with all the state and federal and private sector resources will remain fully activated until further notice. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Do you have any details on the number of injuries and severity of those?
I don't have the final number of injuries. We do know that there were a number of injuries, and but most of them I would characterize in the minor to moderate level, and no report of any fatalities. So I think we're very lucky there, and happy there wasn't anything worse.
Can you talk about the conversations you've been having with private utilities, especially as it pertains to gas lines, and then you have this added concern with wildfire potential?
Well, you know, we've been working very closely with the utilities over the course of the last few months in the effort of preparing communities as a result of public safety power shutoffs, and so that's helped to build that coalition in the effort of making sure that communities are as prepared as possible. We generally have, though, here embedded in the State Operations Center, the California Utility Emergency Association. It is an association that represents all of the power, water, wastewater utility providers and telecommunications. They're embedded here, and they have been working very, very diligently, ensuring that that the priority to get power to things like the hospital is done first, and then, you know, as they move forward and branch out, that the rest of the community gets back up and operational. Right now, there's a big effort on doing gas leak detection, so they've got a lot of sniffer vehicles out there and other kinds of equipment to ensure that that the gas mains or the gas lines get fixed. That's going to always be an issue after an earthquake, and that could take a few days to be able to address that. So, well, the first thing is that if you're in a structure and you start to feel an aftershock or another earthquake, you want to drop, cover, and hold on. The idea is to get under something that is strong and heavy that will protect you in the event of anything that may be falling. You want to cover the back of your head and crouch down under that heavy piece of furniture. Standing in doorways is not a good idea. Standing next to a refrigerator is not a good idea. Refrigerators will move significantly and doors swing. Best to get down underneath something that's solid and in place to be able to protect yourself. If you're driving, pull to the side of the road, put your car in park and stop in a safe location until the shaking stops. Really not want to go running outside if you're in a high-rise. Use the stairwells after the shaking stops to go down the stairwells. Do not use the elevator. Be cognizant of things like glass that may be on the ground or falling glass above you if you do go outdoors. Important to have an emergency kit and some supplies. If you have not gotten those yet, go to one of the stores that's open and get some water and supplies in the event that there is an aftershock. The potential is, talking with California Geologic Survey and the United States Geologic Survey, the seismologist, there will be a significant number of aftershocks, but there is a a 5% chance that you could get another earthquake as large as this earthquake last night. So we want to make sure that people over the next 24 to 48 hours are prepared and cognizant of what to do should more earthquakes occur. Any other questions? Okay, great. We'll do a follow-up press conference as announced, possibly later tonight or.
earthquakes are related. If you go and do a calculation, what's the chance that they're independent? It's essentially zero.
You were calculating before, just guesstimating
Didn't go and redo the calculations, did you?
So let me do this quickly in my head. I think it's about a factor of 8 more powerful in terms of the amount of energy that is released during the earthquake. Now it's being released over a larger area and a longer time, and I think that's folks here in the LA region can attest to that. The ground shaking was pretty long. We would estimate that the actual rupture for this magnitude 7.1 probably took between 15 and 20 seconds, for it to rupture the start at the epicenter and it propagates out across the field. Until we get a chance to look at the data in more detail, we can't be more certain about that.
5 to 10, we've got some data that showed it was a little on the slow side. Probably about the same. Again, these are, the data needs to be downloaded and massaged, and it's Friday night, and so. Well, we will go in and look, but I spent a couple of decades trying to find something that was different about foreshocks than other earthquakes and never found it. We will go in and look, and one thing to be said, we have more data. We have much better stations now for this sequence than we've had for any previous foreshocks that we looked at. So if there's something there, we'll try and find it, but it's not obvious.
You talked at the top about the probability of a second greater magnitude. Does that include the possibility that this could
0.8 coming in.
What's your plan for the next year or so? Are you guys station here studying this thing?
He actually still has a job here.
We are going to be working, analyzing data. There is a ton of information that's coming in. It's going to take a lot of work to go through it, and that's both the information that's coming in digitally on the computers, looking at the seismograms, and then obviously the people out in the field are going to be gathering information as well.
The early warning system worked well. The problem was the distribution to public, and that was a policy decision that doesn't rest with us and is being discussed whether or not the threshold should be lower to give out those in the USGS.
You've got a pretty season.
That's actually relatively common because let's imagine you're pressing something. If you actually squeeze something, you'll often see you get cracks showing up. X-shaped cracks on the sides of buildings after the earthquakes. That's what this is. And so you're accomplishing the same response to stress whether you move this way on this one or this way on this one or this way.
And does that determine the direction?
It can. There is a pattern around the fault. It's called a radiation pattern. So there's one direction when an earthquake moves that gets less shaking than other directions. For instance, pointing from Northridge to Pasadena turned out to be the minimum shaking direction back in that earthquake, and there was no damage essentially in Northridge in Pasadena for the Northridge earthquake, while nearby communities were badly damaged, and that was a minimum shaking direction. So there is that factor. There is also something called directivity, that if you start at one place and you rupture down that fault, the direction you're rupturing towards, it's almost a Doppler effect type of thing, where you get a focusing of energy in the direction that the rupture is moving towards. In this situation, so in the first one, we think that it went in the 6.4, it ruptured towards Ridgecrest, and there was probably some directivity focusing energy in that direction. Here, at least, it's a much bigger earthquake, of course, and the overall shaking level is higher, but at least the directivity was probably focused up towards Independence and then rest of us, we can look at what's happening at Ridgecrest and remember that at some point that's going to be for us. Overall for the state, there are fewer people getting affected here. Those people are suffering a lot, but the rest of the state can move in to help us, move in to help them, and hopefully that's happening now. When we have our earthquake, we're going to have a lot more people that are affected by it, and it's going to be harder to respond. It's been a significant drought. We haven't had an earthquake this size for 20 years. And yet, in that time, we've seen more advances in seismic safety, especially at the city level and county level, than we've seen at any other time in California history. So we don't have to have an earthquake to remind us to get things done, but it sure doesn't hurt. And I think while we've been getting a lot going on, perhaps at the community level, it is individuals. There's a lot of individuals for whom we forget. And here's your opportunity. I think probably trying to get to the websites tonight might be futile. There seems to be a lot of access to the sites, but tomorrow, when you got a little extra time and you remember what happened, earthquakecountry.org has a lot of information about things that you can do individually, but also consider doing it with some community group. Right. So the southernmost part of the San Andreas has to average an earthquake about once every 150 years. We have, the last one on the Mojave segment was 1857. The one on the southernmost part is 1680. Whatever's causing a long interval is happening now, and at some point it'll run out of that interval. And just like our interval between sixes has just ended, it will be happening for the San Andreas at some point too. San Andreas, remember that we said between the 6.4 and the 7.1 is about a factor of 8. 7.1 to 7.8 is the same difference, and it'll be that much bigger. So a 7.8 on the San Andreas is going to be at least 8 times bigger than this earthquake, and of course, a lot of it will be a lot closer to us. But consider this is only 10% the size of the San Andreas earthquake's a pretty big earthquake, and I don't think we should underestimate, just because we didn't get hit that badly, just how difficult it really is right now in the Owens Valley. Okay, Easter Sunday 2010, there was April 4th, the Elmira earthquake of magnitude 7.2. I haven't been including that because it wasn't in California. The rupture was completely within Mexico. So yes, we felt it, and probably a similar sort of distance. Well, we didn't feel quite as strong here, we were a little further away. But it was not one of our fault systems. So when we're talking about earthquake rates, what's happening on the falls, I didn't include that. Right. All of this is random, and it's something people don't like. On top of that random distribution, we add earthquake trigger. So when we talk about a random distribution, that's of sequences. This is still all one sequence for all that we've had, a couple thousand earthquakes right now at this point. The count was about 1,500 before the 7.1 happened. Now, we've only really recorded probably 100 earthquakes since the 7.1, but that's because the ground's moving so much that we can't see the smaller ones.
There are some people out there who are thinking, well, maybe this takes the heat off the lake. Maybe this will relieve the pressure on what's going on. Could you address that?
Okay, whenever one earthquake happens, we get a lot of questions. Does this relieve the pressure over here? Does it make this earthquake worse? What does this tell about the future? What does it mean? And the problem is, what it means is we have earthquakes. And that's really all it means. It is a random distribution. It doesn't make a big earthquake more or less likely. And what we have here in Southern California, maybe we're seeing a situation where we've had this big drought. Maybe that was random fluctuation, in which case we say, well, the long-term rate is definitely higher than what we've been having for the last 20 years, and we're going to have, we really need to be having more earthquakes. Or potentially there was some significance to it, in which case, one earthquake, it's hard to say that you've changed the rate, but probably, if we've gone back to a higher rate, then we're back at a higher rate. And we just just really need to remember the last 20 years was not representative of what we have. We need to average out just from what geology tells us.
And also, just as Dr. Jones had said before, on a human time scale, these types of fluctuations may seem very dramatic, but on a geologic time scale, these are just minor blips. Again, this is a random process. We're just sampling at very discrete times. Well, yeah, and there's actually, when an earthquake occurs, there's a redistribution of stress. So it can relieve stress in some areas, but it can also load up or promote the possibility of another earthquake happening. And that's exactly what we saw here. The 6.4 actually promoted the chance for the 7.1 to occur. So that's when the triggering can happen like that. Even though an earthquake, the 6.4 did release some stress, it actually promoted the subsequent.
And there's really sort of two different phenomena going on. There's what's our long-term rate of earthquakes? When are things happening? That fundamentally random distribution of which fault goes next. And then there's how one earthquake modulates that. And mostly it's happening really nearby. We have had a couple of situations, probably 3 here in California, where we've had an extremely large earthquake, and the rate of other earthquakes goes down for a while. We had it after the Coon County earthquake, we saw it after Landers and Northridge, and we saw it after the 1906 earthquake. And this is, we don't have enough data, right? Only a seismologist says, and I realize that. But with the limited, with what data we have, we can hypothesize whether that's a significant pattern or whether that's happenstance. And we're still trying to understand that. But so you have your long-term rate, and then you have the earthquake triggering. How does one earthquake affect the other? What are the stress changes that happen right now? And that's, we could see yesterday that we made slip on that northwest fault easier to happen. That doesn't mean it's got to keep on moving there. And that's why we ended up giving probabilities, because sometimes it happens, most of the time it doesn't. This is one of those times that it's really, we hope to have data that allows us to say quite a bit.
And you said the proximity to this one to San Andreas, it didn't increase the stress, it's increased.
It's still pretty far, yeah, it's really too far away, so that even, this one's going to have a bit more impact because it's a bigger earthquake, but it's still far enough away that it really is, like our rule of thumb, that it's 3 or 4 fault lengths is about as far as we ever see it. We're probably a little over 4 fault lengths away from San Andreas. So it's closer than when we had the 6.4, but it's still not at the level that gets us to average it. I'm looking at the time, in fact, that it's 10 of 11, and you guys probably all have newscasts at 11 o'clock. My suggestion was we go and do one more check for data and plan on doing a restatement at 11 where we can give you the details of that place, and you can use this for your broadcast. Let us go see what we got.
Thank you.
That was strong safety. That's right.